My name is Monica Hayes. I'm 34 years old, a former investigative journalist now living alone in a run-down house I bought for just under $1,000. Some people called me crazy. Some said I was pathetic. But none of them ever heard my stepmother yell straight into my face in front of the entire extended family, "You're not my daughter. You're no longer part of this family." All because I refused to send money so my sister could go on a mental health retreat in Malibu. They kicked me out of the house, deleted me from the family group chat like I was a smudge on paper they'd been meaning to erase. But I'm still here, and the house they once mocked as garbage is now the place they're knocking on. Have you ever been cast out by your own family just for not doing what they wanted? Leave a comment, hit like, and follow this channel if you've ever had to choose peace over a household built on pressure. Because the story I'm about to tell might be your story, too. I still remember the birthday card from when I turned 12, light blue with smudged balloons on it, left hurriedly on the breakfast table like someone forgot it the night before. My name was spelled wrong. Again. Monica, with a stiff, awkward K, scribbled in black marker, the ink already bleeding for moisture. My stepmother, Dorothy, glanced at it and chuckled. You know Grandma's handwriting isn't what it used to be. But I knew better. Dorothy was the one who picked the card, who wrote it, and who always managed to spell Savannah's name correctly. Every single time. When Savannah graduated college, the whole family flew to the East Coast to attend. They booked a resort by the beach and hosted a champagne party in the backyard. I wasn't invited. Not a single call, not a single mention, despite the fact that when Savannah was still in high school, I once drove overnight from Denver just to attend her school play because she called crying, asking, "Can you come?" I'm so nervous. I used to think they just forgot that I was the older daughter, the self-sufficient one. But those so-called oversights stacked themselves into a wall I could never get past, even just to stand on the edge of a family photo. I once won first place in a state-level journalism competition with an investigative piece on abuses in the county detention system. The article was published front and center in the Denver Sentinel. I brought a copy home and placed it in front of my dad while he was drinking coffee. He glanced at it and nodded. "Savannah just got featured on a podcast, did you know? They said she has such a soulful voice." I didn't react. I was used to it. Because for him, every effort I made was measured by some invisible ruler I never quite reached. Dorothy used to say, "You're the rational one. You don't need the same encouragement Savannah does," as if my emotions were some luxury item I wasn't entitled to. Meanwhile, Savannah only had to cry over a breakup and she'd get a plane ticket home, a freshly cleaned guest room, chamomile tea, and almond cookies waiting on the table. I used to believe I just had to try harder, work more, be more patient. I took on boring policy analysis pieces, accepted late-night interviews no one else wanted, just hoping someone would notice. But the more I achieved, the further back they seemed to step, as if my success somehow made me harder to love. Every holiday felt like a silent exam. That Christmas dinner when I was 26, I asked if I could bring my boyfriend home. Dorothy sighed, "Let's not turn the holidays into a parade of temporary relationships." A week later, Savannah brought home a new boyfriend and everyone popped champagne. My dad grilled his signature steak for my baby girl's special guest. I used to ask myself what I'd done wrong. I wasn't rebellious. I didn't break rules or cause trouble. All I ever wanted was an equal place in the family. But over time, I realized I didn't have to do anything wrong. I just wasn't Savannah. Savannah was the kind of person who could be unemployed for 3 months and be praised for rediscovering herself. If I took time off, I was probably fighting with my boss. She once dropped out of a baking course after 3 sessions, and my dad called it a journey of self-discovery. I once skipped a family reunion to meet a deadline, and they said I was putting work above family. That favoritism wasn't a knife through the chest, it was a dull, persistent scrape, repeated over and over again. Every comment, every forgotten invitation, every event where my name wasn't even on the list. They never shouted that I wasn't good enough. They just behaved as if I'd never been there at all. I used to make excuses for them, told myself my dad was old, Dorothy didn't understand, Savannah was just thoughtless. I defended them until I couldn't even recognize the sound of my own voice. I learned how to laugh when called too harsh, learned not to react when Savannah called me a walking spreadsheet. I learned how to tuck my hurt into unsent text drafts and birthday cards, bought but never given, because I knew no one would remember my birthday anyway. So when they left my name off my father's birthday dinner list, I wasn't surprised. I just felt my heart sink like a worn-out coat hung on the wrong hook. My name wasn't on the decor board, not in the thank you speech, no assigned seat. The air itself that evening seemed to whisper straight into my ears, "You don't belong here." Still, I waited for someone to speak up, a glance, a word, even just the sound of someone calling my name. But even when Savannah raised her glass and said, "Family is where everyone is loved unconditionally," I held on to hope. And then Dorothy turned to me, with that thin smile on her lips but something sharp in her eyes, and said, "If you don't feel like you fit anymore, Monica, you're welcome to leave." I stood up. Quietly, no one stopped me. And in that moment, I no longer wondered if they loved me. I just realized maybe they never learned how to love me at all. I left that birthday party without looking back. No one walked me to the car. No one asked where I was going. But strangely, I felt lighter, as if those cold words had finally freed me from a role I never agreed to play. 2 weeks later, I signed the papers to buy the house. $950, the entirety of what I'd saved from freelance gigs and a few semesters teaching part-time. The realtor didn't believe I was serious. He hesitated even to set the showing, asked more than once, "Are you sure you want that thing?" But I had seen the pictures. I knew it was rotting, the roof sagged, windows shattered, weeds tall enough to hide a child, but like me, it was still standing, abandoned, but not broken. The road to the house curved past old pine trees, gravel crunching beneath my tires the whole way. When I parked, a light drizzle had begun. I didn't have anyone with me, no welcome sign. Just a woman in an old coat, sitting on a folding chair in the yard, staring up at a rain-streaked roof, holding a key like it was the last thread of hope she had left. I didn't cry, not because I was strong, but because I had no tears left. Some pain gets so deep it no longer shows on the surface. Just silence, clenched and heavy. I got out of the car, pulled a suitcase and a cardboard box from the trunk. Inside it was a faded blue curtain from my college apartment. I used to hang it over the desk window to block the morning sun, as if even light needed permission to enter when I wasn't ready for it. The house smelled like time, like wet wood, mildew, and years of dust clinging to every crevice, as if it too had been holding its breath through a long forgotten season. When I stepped onto the floorboards, they groaned beneath me, slow and reluctant, but they held. They didn't stop me. Someone once asked me, "Why don't you rent a nicer place closer to town? It's not like you don't have the ability." I just smiled, because there are some things people will never understand. In a polished place, I'd have to keep up appearances, measure every word, play the role my family always expected. But here, among peeling walls and a water-stained ceiling, I wasn't anyone. And that's exactly how I finally got to be myself. I didn't hang family photos on the wall, didn't frame any diplomas, just placed a wooden desk beside the one intact window where I could sit and write, read, and look out at the forest and back. I didn't need much. One working outlet, an old water jug, a few notebooks, and coffee in a chipped mug. That was enough. That first night, I curled up under a thin blanket, listening to the wind whistle through the cracks in the door, like the voices of those no longer willing to be heard. The house was cold, but not frightening, just sad, like me. The next day, Dorothy sent a single message. "Hope you're happy with your foolish decision." No well wishes, no check-in. I set the phone down on the table without replying. I didn't have the energy to prove anything anymore. Not to her, not to Savannah, not to my father. I used to think being independent meant showing them I could survive without them. But now, I live because I need somewhere to breathe. Not for anyone else. A few neighbors passed by from time to time, giving me odd glances. An elderly woman walking her dog once asked, "You really moved in there?" I nodded. She paused, then said softly, "I just hope you're not like the last one." I didn't ask what she meant. I knew homes like this always carried some kind of history. But its past was like mine, forgotten, misnamed, rarely corrected. On the third morning, I stood in the living room, looking up at the ceiling, cracked in every direction, wondering if I could fix it all. But when I looked down at my hands, I remembered. I built things from nothing before. I'd unraveled entire cases piece by piece to get to the truth in my reporting. I'd driven hundreds of miles just to speak to one anonymous witness. Fixing a house, maybe, was the same. Start with the parts that look most broken. I taped a blank sheet of paper to the wall. The first words I scribbled read, "You don't need anyone's permission to live with dignity." I wrote it by hand with a black ink pen whose cap was long gone. The letters weren't even, but each one was real. No flourishes, no frame, just something I could see every morning when the light came through the old window and landed on the dusty floor. To them, maybe I had just moved into a haunted house. But to me, I had just discovered a peace I'd never known before, a place where no one asked me to be softer, quieter, or more like Savannah, a place where I was allowed to exist without asking. That morning, mist still clung to the eaves when I heard a knock at the door. 3 taps, clear and intentional. I was sweeping dry leaves off the porch when I froze, not out of surprise, but because a part of me, one that had gotten too used to these sudden arrivals, already sensed something. Savannah stood there, a long knit coat down to her knees, hair in perfect waves, oversized sunglasses like she was hiding from the sky itself. She didn't smile right away, tilted her head, scanned the yard, pulled down her glasses, and smirked like nothing had changed. "Wow," she said, drawing out the word like she'd stepped onto the set of some old TV show. "This house has character." I leaned the broom against the porch rail, eyes fixed on her posture, familiar unease hidden under a costume of confidence. She blinked, then spoke with a voice half playful, half casual. "I just came to talk. The retreat's kitchen burned down, clients freaked out, I had to cancel everything this week. Just a few days. I know you don't really like me anymore, but we're still family, right?" I didn't speak for a moment. The breeze from the pines carried the scent of sap and damp wood from the roof above. I nodded slowly. 3 days. Savannah showed her gratitude by giving me a loose shoulder hug, like an old coworker you bump into at the airport. She pulled her suitcase inside and walked straight into the kitchen like she'd lived here before. 3 days, I told myself. 3 days would pass quickly. That night, she made instant noodles, but plated them like a guesthouse meal. Scented candles, white wine in a paper cup, and even a tablecloth I'd never touched. "You really should make your life more pleasant," she said, as if giving a TED talk. I didn't respond. I scooped up a forkful of cold noodles and stared out the window. By Monday morning, I woke early to strange whispers coming from the kitchen. Not someone talking to me, someone talking with a rhythm. The familiar tone of someone live streaming. I stepped into the hallway. Harsh white light from a ring light spilled under the kitchen door. I froze at the threshold where a phone's camera was angled toward the countertop, my morning coffee spot, now staged like some healing retreat scene. Savannah stood in front of the camera, full foundation, hair neatly pinned up, voice sugary smooth. "Today I want to take you to where my sister's been living. A very humble place. She's been through a lot. This is a temporary refuge for a wounded soul." Then she zoomed in on my faded blue curtain, the chipped kettle, and even the crack in the wall I'd patched with cardboard to block the draft. A message popped up on the live stream. "Is she in a homeless shelter?" Savannah laughed lightly, shamelessly. "No, sweetie, this is her house. Sounds sad, right? But things will get better." I said nothing. I stepped forward, quietly reached for the phone, and pulled it from the stand. The live stream went dead. Savannah turned, her face freezing mid-expression. "What are you doing?" she snapped, her voice rising. I looked straight into her eyes. "This wasn't for your audience." "I was just trying to help," she started, voice quivering like she might cry. "I thought people could chip in. You need support, right?" I didn't respond. I turned away, heart clenched, not in anger, but from the familiar sting of realizing someone else had once again stepped into my life and turned my story into their backdrop. 2 days later, I found the GoFundMe link circulating online. The headline read, "Help my sister escape poverty, help her find herself." The profile picture was me, carrying a trash bag out the back door, hair tied messily, hands dirty. Another photo showed me curled on the couch, wrapped in the old blanket Aunt Ruth had mailed after everything fell apart. The description beneath was drenched in fake sentiment. "My sister has fallen on hard times. She lives alone in a house with no electricity, no hot water, but I believe in miracles. Every dollar is a ray of light." Recipient, Savannah Hayes Wellness, LLC. Displayed donations, $21,073, and the number kept rising. I sat on the wooden stairs, hands trembling around my phone, not because I wanted the money, but because I had no say in my own story. Once again, I was turned into a shadow, but it was on social media, where strangers were shedding tears over a version of me I didn't recognize. Savannah walked into the living room like nothing had happened and smiled. "See? I told you, the internet is power." I didn't say anything. But I knew that if I stayed silent, she would keep going, and I couldn't let it slide like all the times before. I couldn't sleep that night. The kitchen light stayed on. Savannah had retreated to her room, the door half closed, like she wanted it to send a message. I sat alone at the wooden table, clutching the phone with the GoFundMe link still open. My mind spun like wind through a forest, chaotic, cold, and completely out of control. I typed my name into the search bar. Posts flooded in like endless snowflakes piling on top of each other. Someone had shared the fundraiser link with a caption, "Help this woman find a home." Another commented, "She looks so broken. I donated $100. There was a short video clip, taken from Savannah's live stream in my kitchen, cut to show me scrambling to wipe the floor, overlaid with sad background music and tearful narration, "Help my sister rise from rock bottom." Not one person asked if I wanted help. No one knew it was all staged, from the lighting to the script. Around 3 a.m. I got a message, a number I didn't recognize. The sender's name read, Eli Marcus. "Monica? This is Eli." Eli from criminal law class back then. "I saw the video about you, and something didn't sit right. I work with a legal support group for people whose images are being misused online. Do you need help?" I read that message over and over, like someone stranded in a storm, hearing a voice call from far away. The one I used to study with for finals. The one who lent me his constitutional law textbook when I forgot mine at the print shop. He had always been quiet, kind, scribbling notes in blue ink along the margins. I typed slowly. "I really do, but I don't know where to start." He replied almost immediately. "Start with screenshots. Save every post, video, comment, especially the account receiving the donations. Can you confirm you never gave permission to use your image or name?" I confirmed. Each of his messages made me shake, but also breathe easier, as if someone was slowly loosening the ropes around my chest. Eli scheduled a video call for the next morning. He said, "We'll start with a cease and desist, and if we need to go further, we will." It rained the next day. I sat in the kitchen, facing the foggy laptop screen. Eli appeared in the frame, same calm eyes, now with a few more wrinkles near the corners. He didn't ask how I was. He just nodded and said in a steady voice, "Let's get to work." We created a shared folder. Each video was downloaded, every link saved. He showed me how to screen record my phone, capture the GoFundMe descriptions, timestamps, and donor lists. He also walked me through submitting a public inquiry to the platform, requesting verification of Savannah's account. She registered this campaign as support for you, Eli said. But the funds are going to her business. That's a clear violation. She could even be prosecuted if we can prove the intent to deceive. I never thought I could sit in front of a screen for hours, sifting through every piece of a distorted version of myself. Each photo shared felt like a slice through my dignity. But I did it, not out of revenge, but because, for the first time in years, I wanted to reclaim myself. 3 days later, the cease and desist letter was finalized. Eli sent a hard copy via overnight delivery. Inside the thick envelope were sharp, decisive words: warning Savannah for using my name and image without consent, demanding the fundraiser be shut down, all related content removed, and any funds returned immediately. I read every line, my heartbeat slowing, not out of fear, but because I realized I wasn't alone anymore in saying no. I slipped the letter into another envelope, sealed it, and laid it on the table in front of Savannah as she was applying makeup by the window, natural light catching her powdered face. She looked up at me in the mirror. "What are you doing?" she asked. I just said, "You might want to read that before your next live stream." Savannah picked it up, opened it, and within seconds, every muscle in her face twitched like electricity had jolted through her. "You're threatening me?" I quietly stepped back, still holding a warm coffee mug. "No, this is how I take back control." No one screamed, no slamming tables, no pulling hair like in some cheap soap opera. Just a gray morning in a kitchen that smelled of damp wood and wounds, now framed as legal evidence. I walked toward the window and pulled the curtain open. Outside, the rain hadn't stopped, but inside, for the first time, I felt like I was finally doing what needed to be done, even if it was late. And maybe that's exactly where resistance begins, not with rage, but with proof, silence, and an envelope placed in the right hands. That morning, I woke up earlier than usual, not because I hadn't slept well, but because I felt something I couldn't name. Part calm, part tense, like knowing a storm is coming but still choosing to open the window. I didn't make anything fancy, just poured a cup of tea, set it on the table, and sat down in front of my old laptop, now sluggish with age. Savannah had been heavily promoting her Reconnection livestream all week. A so-called heartfelt conversation with her followers, a moment to open up after recent misunderstandings. Meanwhile, I, the one caught in the center of it all, was neither invited, mentioned, nor given any chance to respond. At exactly 10 a.m., my phone lit up with a notification. Savannah Hayes is now live. I clicked in. She appeared like a completely different version of the person who had stood in my kitchen. Warm yellow lighting, soft background music, her face flawless with makeup. She sat on a wicker chair by a sunlit window, wearing a linen dress in a muted color, neck tied with a ribbon like she was filming a tea brand commercial. "Hi, my sweet friends," she began, voice velvet smooth, face painted in carefully calculated weariness. "These past few days have been challenging, not just emotionally, but with family too." She paused, blinking as if holding back tears. "But I believe in healing, and I believe the truth always comes to light." I stared at the screen, viewer count ticking up by the thousands, my heartbeat steady, not fast, not slow. Next to me was the original letter Eli had sent. The document he reminded me about this morning, at exactly that time, Monica. It's scheduled, it's been signed. 15 minutes went by, and she kept talking. About sacrifice, about sisterhood, about being misunderstood. And then, while answering a viewer's question, "Have you ever felt hurt by your own family?" a small movement appeared at the edge of the frame. A woman in a white blouse with an earpiece stepped in from the side of the stage. She held a thick envelope, carefully placing it on the table beside Savannah, whispering something unintelligible. Savannah turned her head, her eyebrows furrowing for just a split second. She opened the envelope in full view, still trying to smile like she'd just received a thank you note. But then her expression changed. Not to anger, it was something between horror and disbelief. She scanned a few lines, her eyes darting quickly, fingers tightening around the paper. The coordinator behind the camera signaled awkwardly. The background music stopped in an eerie stutter. The chat box lit up with questions. What was that? What kind of letter did she just get? Why does she look so tense? Savannah opened her mouth like she wanted to speak, but her eyes flicked down to the final line of the letter. Unauthorized use of personal image and information may be subject to legal action. Seconds later, the live stream cut. No goodbye, no closing music, just a black screen with simple white text. Live has ended. I sat there a few minutes longer, still, my mind completely blank, not out of joy, but because it felt like someone had just returned a piece of the truth that had been taken from me for far too long. My phone started buzzing nonstop. Notifications flooded in from Instagram, Reddit, Twitter. Short clips from the live stream were being chopped and shared everywhere. People were discussing Savannah's breathless reaction. Some speculated she had just been served. Others were digging into the letter's contents. Some reposted her earlier content, questioning why those tear-jerking stories lacked any actual evidence. One Reddit post hit the top of the afternoon's discussion thread, titled, "Did the exploited sister finally speak up?" Beneath it were hundreds of comments. One person wrote, "I donated $50. Now I feel like a fool." Another posted a screenshot of the GoFundMe description, comparing it to exaggerated or false claims. Every detail was being dissected. In those posts, I saw my face again, but this time I wasn't labeled a failure in need of saving. I was someone standing up. I looked out the window. The rain from the night before had left a shallow puddle beneath the eaves. Its surface was smooth, reflecting the gray sky. In it, I saw my own silhouette. A woman once called a burden, now sitting quietly in the house they called trash, whole and unshaken. And maybe, for the first time in many years, I wasn't afraid of a knock at the door. I hadn't planned on going. For a week after the livestream cut off, Savannah Hayes' name still swirled around the internet. She stayed completely silent, no new posts, no public appearances, no apology. But then, the gala invitation arrived. A gold-embossed card, raised lettering that read, "Healing Women Foundation, Fundraising Gala for Restoring Trust." It was mailed with no return address, but I recognized the engraved signature at the bottom. And I understood what this was. This gala wasn't for healing, it was for redemption, for sympathy, to whitewash the latest failure. I didn't go to retaliate, I went to witness. And to walk, just once, into a place where someone else had used my story to paint their own image, and not flinch. The gala was held in a grand hotel in Los Angeles, where red velvet lined the walls, the marble floors shone like mirrors, and the air smelled of expensive perfume mixed with champagne. I wore a simple navy dress and scuffed shoes with worn soles. Around my neck was a silver chain my mother had once forgotten to return. Worthless to them, but the only thing left from the woman who'd always said my name right without needing a reminder. I chose a seat at the very back, behind a stone column. On stage, Savannah appeared in a flowing white silk gown, her hair softly curled, skin glowing under the spotlight. She began with a trembling voice and misty eyes, speaking of overcoming misunderstandings and the resilience of women facing media storms. Applause. Nods. A few cameras zoomed in on her face. She transitioned into a slideshow highlighting her community efforts. The giant screen behind her flicked through photos of donation drives, healing workshops, and handwritten thank you notes everyone knew were staged. But then, something off-script happened. The next slide wasn't a pretty image. It was a screenshot of text messages, clear font, the unmistakable style of iMessage. Let her rot in that dump. The more miserable, the more donations. Keep the lighting low, use the old kitchen corner, heightens the emotion. She looks like she hit rock bottom, perfect for a rebirth visual. The whole room froze. Whispers spread like ripples. Someone cleared their throat. The MC stammered, trying to move to the next slide, but the tech's hand had dropped. He stood frozen behind the curtain. On stage, Savannah didn't move. Her eyes widened, face pulled tight in an effort to keep it together. Then a voice rose from the front of the room. A silver-haired woman in a soft gray suit stepped onto the side podium. I recognized her. Krista Linwood, president of the Skyline Estates Neighborhood Council, the community district where my house was located. Krista didn't need a microphone. She spoke clearly, each word deliberate, like lines from a courtroom statement. I can no longer stay silent when my organization has been used for personal gain. She turned towards Savannah. You claimed that Monica Hayes was homeless, living in an emergency situation, in order to apply for winter relief grants and medical aid. You used her name, her address, and fabricated her living conditions. No one interrupted, no forks touched plates, no glasses clinked, only a silence so thick it pressed against the stage light still burning on Savannah's increasingly pale face. Krista continued, we have terminated all partnership contracts. Any charitable funds tied to your name are now under investigation. I sat still, feeling nothing and everything all at once. There's no such thing as a sweet victory when you realize its cost was years of being a side character in someone else's story. But one thing was clear, this time I wasn't the silent one. Not the one twisted, exploited, or reshaped to create artificial light for someone else's stage. I was real, with a real story, real pain, and a voice that had once been buried now rising not through shouting, but through undeniable evidence. The room was still heavy with shock as Krista Linwood stepped off the stage, leaving behind a thick silence, as if the whole audience had just witnessed the curtain drop on a story they never wanted to confront. Savannah stood there, one hand clutching her sleeve, the other loosely gripping the mic. She tried to smile, but it was crooked, fading fast under the pale yellow spotlight. Her lips parted, like she was about to say something, but then stopped. Her eyes fixed on a distant point, as if she'd forgotten what part of the act she was in. Then, a sudden movement from the second row. My father. He stood up slowly, not rushed, not needing support the way I'd seen him move at formal events before. His charcoal gray suit had a slight crease at the left shoulder, his polished black shoes worn at the soles. He walked straight toward the stage, eyes forward, face unreadable. He didn't flinch from the growing whispers around him. Savannah froze when she saw him. So did I. Every part of me tensed with wariness. In my whole life, I had never seen my father step onto a stage uninvited, and certainly never walk toward discomfort instead of away from it. Something he always did when the truth threatened to disturb the perfect family image he guarded so desperately. He reached center stage, turned to face the audience, and took out his phone. I thought he was going to call someone, or maybe play a voice memo as some sort of justification. But he didn't look at the screen. He held the phone up in front of him, like he was forcing himself to confront something he'd hidden for too long. My name is Jack Hayes, he said, not loud but clear. Father of Savannah and Monica. Another wave of whispers stirred. People near me began to turn around. I stayed still, gripping the edge of my dress, feeling both cold and empty. I used to think my job was to protect the more fragile child, the one who cried more, the one who needed extra care. He paused and inhaled, his shoulders sinking just slightly. But I was wrong. I chose the wrong person to trust. I stayed silent for too long. Savannah tried to interrupt, but he raised his hand, never looking at her. I assumed Monica was strong enough not to need defending. I was wrong. Her strength was never an excuse to abandon her. No applause, no one dared move, only the sound of Savannah swallowing hard and the sharp clack of high heels from another corner of the stage. Dorothy! She stood there, one hand gripping her glittery clutch, eyes locked on her husband as if she no longer recognized the man before her. What the hell are you doing? She asked, quietly but loud enough for the front rows to hear. Jack turned to her, then simply answered, "I'm taking responsibility." And then she turned and walked away. Her heels hit the floor, louder now, angrier. No one stopped her. Savannah didn't call after her mother. And my father, he didn't follow either. I looked at him one last time, without tears. I didn't get up to hug him. I didn't smile with pride. I just nodded, slowly, enough for him to see, as if to say, "I heard you. I see you. But I'm no longer the daughter looking for approval from a man who chose silence." I left the ballroom through a side exit where the lights didn't reach. The sounds behind me faded, like the echoes of a world I had finally stepped away from. I walked straight to the parking lot without turning back, because I no longer expected anyone to call my name, and I wasn't afraid if no one did. Early March in Colorado still had a chill in the air. The snow had melted, but the morning cold sank into my fingers every time I held a paintbrush. I stood on a wooden ladder, left hand steadying me, right hand carefully brushing white paint over a window frame whose old layers had peeled like aged skin. The smell of paint mixed with damp earth, sun-warm wood, and something else entirely, a scent that felt like beginning. It had been nearly a month since the gala night. Savannah disappeared from social media. The praise-filled posts about her faded like a wave retreating. Sponsors deleted their endorsements, and the organizations that once partnered with her quietly removed her logo from their websites. I didn't search her name. I didn't care what people were saying anymore. I returned to this house, not to run away, but to do something I never had the chance to do before. Begin again without asking permission. The day I took down the old house number and replaced it with a new sign, the rain had just stopped. I painted each letter by hand, the strokes uneven, a little crooked, but I didn't fix them. I left it exactly as it was and hung it beneath the still bare trellis on the front porch. The sign read, "Welcome to a place where you don't need permission to be loved." At first, I only planned to fix the kitchen, replace the pipes, repaint the walls, but then ideas started to grow. The back room got beautiful light in the morning, so why not make it a writing space? The room next door had a window overlooking the garden. Why not turn it into a little workshop? I flipped old furniture, scrubbed stains, patched wood, every piece with my own hands, sometimes with tears mixed in. Neighbors began showing up, not the curious kind, the kind who knocked gently and handed over a bunch of carrots from their backyard, a tray of still-warm muffins, or a pair of work gloves to borrow. Mr. MacArthur from the house at the top of the hill brought over an old wooden crate, saying I could take it apart and make bookshelves. Mrs. Linda, next door, knelt quietly in the garden, pulling weeds while I fumbled with the shovel. "You know," she said while tugging at some wild ferns, "this place used to belong to a woodworker. He lived alone, but every summer he'd open the yard so neighborhood kids could build birdhouses." I sat beside her, hands gripping the shovel handle, not because I was emotional, but because in that moment I felt something I thought was a fantasy for years. That maybe, just maybe, there could be a community where you didn't have to play a role to belong. I rearranged the writing room, set the desk by the window, placed a bookshelf beside it, and added a velvet armchair I found at a garage sale, still draped in faded fabric. Morning light filtered through sheer white curtains, just enough to read the ink on paper without needing a lamp. On the desk there was a glass jar. I called it the jar of silence. Every time I felt pain I couldn't say out loud, I wrote it on a slip of paper, rolled it up, and dropped it in. When it's full, I'll burn it. It's how I return my hurt to the world, in a way no one else has to carry. The first workshop had just 3 people, a retired teacher, a grad student studying psychology, and a man around my age recently divorced. We didn't write about pain or try to turn the past into poetry. We just wrote truthfully, shared honestly, listened without judging. I didn't speak much, just nodded when someone paused mid-sentence and stared down at the page. Between fixing walls, pulling weeds, painting trim, and rereading my old lines, I realized something so simple it shocked me. Everything I'd been searching for all these years wasn't in someone else's hands. It was here, in the bricks, in the birdsong at dawn, in the eyes of a stranger who understands what it feels like to be forgotten and still chooses to stay. I didn't build a castle. I didn't raise a monument to some grand victory. I just stitched back together a house that used to be mocked and turned it into a place quiet enough for people to finally hear themselves. And standing in the yard, watching the grass grow like a living carpet, I didn't feel like I'd won. I just felt like I was finally living, in a way no one could call wrong anymore. That afternoon, the sky turned gray. The wind whispered through the pines, sounding like a sad melody without words. I was sitting on the porch holding a cup of hot tea, watching the neighborhood kids toss dry leaves across the yard. The air felt strangely peaceful. No rush, no pretending. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I pulled it out. The screen showed a name I once believed was part of me, Savannah. The message was short. No question marks, no emojis, no hint of regret. Everything's falling apart. I need a place to stay, just a few weeks. I won't be a bother if you let me. I know you're generous. I read it again and again. No apology, no acknowledgement of the damage done. Just a request, cloaked in that familiar tone. She's struggling, and I'm expected to reach out. I didn't reply right away. I closed the phone, walked back into the house. In the narrow hallway, warm yellow light from the back window spilled across a wall where I'd kept an old family photo. Not to remember, but to never forget. I stopped in front of one small frame, maybe the only thing I'd never taken down. It was old, faded, from a school play when I was 9. I stood on stage in a paper crown and a handmade dress my mother sewed. The spotlight was dim, the backdrop messy, but in the photo, my eyes were wide, like I was waiting for someone in the audience to say my name. No one did. And that photo had reminded me for years that I learned to stand alone very early. I set my cup down, took out my phone again. My fingers trembled, not from anger, but because the unsaid things often weigh more than the harshest words ever spoken. I typed, slow and steady. Savannah, there's no space for lies here anymore. You had a chance to be real. You chose something else. I hope you find real light. I didn't add anything else. No explanations, no reopening old wounds. I hit send, placed the phone face down on the table, and turned toward the window. Outside, the kids were chalking shapes onto the steps. One girl used yellow chalk to draw a crooked sun, its rays lopsided but still shining. I leaned against the frame, one hand resting on the windowsill. No car horns, no shouting. Just a rare kind of stillness I had fought too long to reclaim. I didn't choose forgiveness to preserve a false connection. I chose clarity, even if it came with distance. Because in the end, not everyone deserves entry into a place you've paid your entire life to protect. I don't know what you think, but some boundaries, once crossed, can't be walked back over. I don't hate Savannah, and maybe I never truly wanted her to suffer. But some lessons can't be learned with a late apology. And some doors, once closed, aren't meant to punish. They're meant to protect. Have you ever been there? When family turns away, but comes back when they need something, like nothing ever happened? Would you open the door, or hold on to the peace you sacrificed your youth to build? I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below, because sometimes telling your own story is the first step toward healing. And if you want to hear more real stories about family, about love, about what we have to let go of to find ourselves, don't forget to follow this channel. There's more I haven't told yet, and who knows, maybe a part of you is in these stories too.